So again, if you're just hopping on, my name is Luke Womack, Executive Director of the Go Fund. So glad to be with you tonight. Grateful for each one of you. And I'm just going to jump into a quick update on the organization as we dive into the Soto or State of the Org for this evening. So let's dive in. I'd like to share a couple things with you tonight, primarily just a look back and a look forward on where we've been and where we're going as an organization. And then we'll jump into the interview with David and Emily. And like I mentioned, followed with some Q&A. So as we're looking back and looking forward, first I'd like to share with you kind of a snapshot of our impact to date numerically. We know numbers are just one thing, but they're important. So we want to share them and give you an update. To date, as you see three numbers on the screen, the number on the left represents how much student debt we paid off so far. What that means is dollars that have been raised, that have gone out, that have already been applied toward the student loans or the student debt of one of our approved missionary partners who's currently working on the field. So if you add up all student debt we paid off since we started in 2014 or so, it's 643,000. So about 2/3 of $1 million, which is super cool because it's not just dollars that we're looking at, it's unreached people who are being reached because of that. So as we're paying off the student debt for these missionaries, the exchange is that they're working among people without access to the gospel. So those dollars represent people who are hearing the gospel. Also 84 missionary partners. So we're a total of 84 units or families or singles, meaning that's the number of missionaries that we've approved for whom we will pay their student debt. About 50 of them or so are on the field or on field status, even if they're on furlough, meaning that the majority of them have actually started their work on the field, and the other 30 plus are currently in a pre-field status. So basically, they haven't made it to the field yet, but they're approved. So long as they make it to the field, we'll start paying their student debt. Obviously, getting to the field takes some time. And then the third number is debt assumed. So if you add up all the student debt of those 84 missionary families, it's $4.3 million. If we paid out everything we've committed to, if we did that today, it'd be a total of 4.3 million. Of course, we don't pay all at once. We pay monthly across about a decade. So that's the total that we've committed to, and we're in a good financial position to be able to do that for these 84. So kind of looking at missionaries approved next. This is just in Q3. So just in the last quarter, we were able to approve 9 new missionaries, which actually represents the most missionaries we have ever approved, which is so exciting because this is why we exist. We want people who are otherwise qualified, who would never get to the field without assistance, to be able to get there and also stay there with the assistance of the Go Fund and people who have helped get them there. The locations that these 9 are going to, obviously we're using regions here, not countries for security, but 2 are going to Central Asia, 2 to East Asia, 1 to Southeast Asia, and 4 to be determined. Now that might seem kind of peculiar, like how do you commit to going overseas without knowing where you're going? Well, we actually really like that because what that tells us is these people are committed to going long term to the unreached, and they're lining up all the solutions for student debt and training beforehand, kind of have a blank check, and they're asking God to write in the amount. In other words, God, where do you want to send us? We just want to go where we'll be made most valuable for the kingdom. And they have obviously really sharp people guiding them on where to go through their agency, among other advisors. So we're excited about those 9. Thank you to you for your contributions, your partnership, your prayers that allows us to continue to approve missionaries. It's a little bit surreal that we get to do this. It's a peculiar thing that we do to the world, but this thing is so needed and it's so important for the sake of the gospel, making it to the unreached. So thank you to you for making that happen. A fun update here. We were able for the first time to attend a church service in which one of our missionary partners was being commissioned to go to East Asia. So we showed up to that. We were able to say, hey, God bless you, church, for sending out this wonderful family and for supporting them financially as they go. Our part in the deal is we're going to pay the student debt. So that was really significant for us for a variety of reasons. But I think the most important of which is this: the Go Fund is not sending anybody. The church is doing all of the sending, and that's a theological statement. As the church sends out its members and its congregants, we want to support local churches in sending out by playing our part of paying the student debt, which most churches cannot do. So that's the part that we play, and we just want to get behind the local church, not neglect it, not separate ourselves from it, but come behind it as the church does ascending, and we just play the part of paying the student debt so the church can do her job and help to finish the Great Commission by God's grace. In terms of revenue over the last years, to give you kind of a snapshot of where we've been, in 2015, if we're just looking at revenue in the first 3 quarters of the year, so quarter one to quarter three, 2015 was 195,000, all the way up to 795,000 this year in the first 3 quarters. So that's through the end of September this year, not including October. You will notice we had a little bit of a dip in 2020. That was due to a variety of reasons. Obviously, 2020 brought some unexpected changes for most of the world. We had to shift our strategy quite a bit, and it was a good time to do it. In 2019, we had already planned on shifting toward a more relationship-based development approach, meaning instead of focusing on the transactions, we really wanted to invest in the relationships of the people supporting the ministry, and we're already starting to see the fruit of that. Now 2 years after that strategy is put in place, even with the challenge that COVID brought. So we're really excited about that, continuing to grow, and we've already had a wonderful October that we're excited to report next time we get together for Soto in January or so. So again, these are just numbers, but they're important, and each of you is behind these numbers, and it's meaningful to the end that we're able to get the gospel to places where it's never been, and likely wouldn't go anytime soon without these missionaries getting there. So thank you again for helping us to be successful in that. This is not just the Go Fund staff. We're just a part of the puzzle, but we need you. We're grateful. Looking ahead and kind of currently as well, we're currently rolling out 1040 Podcast Season 3. Pretty exciting. We've had 24,000 downloads on the podcast and about 3,500 downloads just in the last 30 days. So there's been some good momentum as we've pumped a third season. I believe we've actually had 7 episodes released now as of Tuesday. So we've had quite a few go out. Check it out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you use. Just type in 1040 1040 podcast, and you can hear some great episodes. And actually, you can go back to seasons 1 and 2. There's some good interviews with people like David Platt. David and Emily are actually on season 1 as well, so you can hear more of their story that we won't be able to discuss tonight. But I encourage you to listen to that as well for encouragement. Looking ahead, I'd like to kind of share with you where we're going. You may have heard this before, but by 2025, our vision is to fund the student debt for 1 in 50 missionaries to the unreached. So currently, we're funding about 1 in 200 missionaries to the unreached. It's actually probably a little lower than that now, closer to 1 in 150. But essentially, there's 13,000 people working somewhere among the unreached in the missional capacity, and we'd like to fund 1 in 50 of them. So that's about 250 or so of them. So the point is 1 in 50 missionaries among the unreached, we want to be funding their student debt, which is about 2% of the global missions force among the unreached. How will we get there, and why does it matter? Well, for starters, it matters because of the groups we're going to be able to invite into that. The Great Commission is not just for missionaries. It's for everyone who calls themselves a follower of Christ. And we want to recognize and celebrate this. So for instance, we have employees at the Go Fund, and we're inviting them into obedience to the Great Commission. By 2025, we think we'll need roughly 25 employees to get this far to do what we need to do. So we'd be inviting, 18 more people into that on top of what we have now. Currently, we have something like 1,600 donors, and to get to this point, we would need about 7,500. So we'd be inviting, an additional, what is that, close to 6,000 donors to participate in this, which is great because they get to play a part in obeying the Great Commission through giving and praying and participating. And then also, of course, 250 missionaries. We'd be inviting them into being obedient to the Great Commission by going overseas and accepting God's direction on their life to go, which we're so excited about. And we're thrilled at the prospect of potentially tripling the number of missionaries that we're helping today by 2025. So what will this cost? We think it'll cost roughly $5 million per year in annual revenue. We'll probably do close to 1.2 or 1.3 this year. So that's about what it'll cost. That's a piece of the puzzle. But the important part is 1 in 50 missionaries to the unreached and inviting these groups into participate in obedience to the Great Commission. Now, another super exciting thing that's coming up for us just in the next few weeks, if you're a prayer warrior, we need you. We have two conferences coming up, and at both conferences, we'll be making a significant financial appeal. So we're major sponsors at each of these conferences. The first one is in just a couple weeks in Arkansas. That's NWA, Northwest Arkansas for the nations. If you're not from Arkansas, it's real. There is a great group of people in Northwest Arkansas who really care about the gospel making it to the unreached. There should be, roughly 500 people there, and we're going to be making a financial appeal from stage. So please pray for that it would go well. And then another significant opportunity, CrossCon 21. I mentioned it at the top of the hour, but we'll be going to Kentucky as a team. We're taking about a dozen people out there, and we're going to have a major presence at that conference that should have closer to 10,000 people, which is super exciting. And they're giving us 15 minutes on stage to make a financial appeal, to invite people to pay off student debt for missionaries to the unreached. So our goal is to raise up 300 new monthly donors at that event, which will provide roughly $50,000 in annual recurring revenue for student debt repayment. Another way to say that is it'd fund 10 new missionaries. So at this conference, we could potentially fund 10 new missionaries, which is incredible. So please be praying for that, that the talks would go well. And again, two of you will have the opportunity to get free digital access to that conference at the end of this call tonight. So that's where we've been and where we're headed. Again, thank you for making this happen. The Go Fund isn't my thing. It's not the Go Fund staff's thing. We hope you feel that it's your thing and it's our thing together, because together we're being obedient to play our part in fulfilling the Great Commission by God's grace. So we love you. We're grateful for you and glad you're here tonight. I just want to do a quick introduction. I had the privilege of meeting David and Emily in college. I think it was their senior year. Check me on this if I'm wrong. But they're a sharp couple. I mean, they went into school without a ton of money. They didn't grow up with a lot of wealth. David got a degree in, theology. Emily, I think you were in health, kinesiology, something along that track. And they realized sometime in college, they're like, hey, God has called us to actually not be a pastor and a pastor's family in America, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think he's directing us to go to the jungle instead, which is a bit of a shift. So the problem is missionaries don't make a lot of money, and they knew that, and they were stuck with all this student debt. So they were crushing it. I mean, their senior year, I think they had like 5 jobs or something like that to pay the thing down. And they're like, hey, if it takes us a decade, it takes us a decade. And that's when we caught wind of their story. And I remember sitting down with them at the dinner table, a close friend of both of ours, and saying, guys, we have this idea. What if instead of you staying here for a decade and paying off your student debt, like, what if we just paid it so you could go now? And then they're like crying. They're like, yeah, let's
We're
do
still
that.
We're gonna
crying.
cry
We're
again.
still crying. Yeah.
And they're like, that sounds really good. Like, how much money do you have? We're like, we don't have any money, but we'll figure it out. Like, we'll go find it. If God wants to do this, he's going to provide. So, we had a little handshake deal at the dinner table there. And by God's grace, he just blew us away. They were on stage at our very first fundraising event in 2015. And David read this letter from a tribal chief in Papua New Guinea that basically said, are we rotten meat that you would not send one of your missionaries to us? And everyone in the audience is just crying. They're like, okay, how much does it cost? Let's get them overseas tonight. And by God's grace, he provided enough that we could partner with them. So it was soon after that, I think it was like early 2016, something like that. They got on a plane, packed up their stuff, sold their belongings, and went to Papua New Guinea, where they've been for the last, I want to say, 5-6 years, something like that. So that's kind of a little bit of a pre-introduction for you guys. But I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Maybe to start, I could ask you this. So you've been in Papua New Guinea, this little island on the Pacific Rim, kind of by like Australia and Indonesia. You've been there for the last 6 years. For people who've never heard your story, like, catch us up to speed. What have you been working on for 6 years?
Yeah, definitely. Well, just right before those 6 years, so we did a 1.5 year training with our organization. And then, yeah, like Luke said, the summer of 2015, headed off to Papua New Guinea. And so when we first got there, our first job was to learn the trade language of Papua New Guinea. So Papua New Guinea is very different, as it has over over 800 different distinct languages. But our first task was to learn the trade language, which is Melanesian Talk Pidgin, and that took about a year. And we just got adjusted to the Papua New Guinea culture, the way of life, really absorbing ourselves into, their culture and language. Once we tested out of the Melanesian Talk Pidgin, then it was our task was to begin looking for a tribe that we could move into. And like Luke said, we had tons of letters. It wasn't hard to find a tribe. It's hard to pick which one to go to, as there were so many letters and of different people groups that were asking for missionaries. And so along with our coworkers, the Muellers, Nathan and Rachel Mueller, and Chad and Martha Earl, we began looking for a tribe. And this was in 2016. And we heard about the Malayali people group somewhere up in the Anga province of Papua New Guinea. And so our guys got dropped off at an airstrip that we knew was in the vicinity. And they hiked for a good day.
Oh, it was like, 18 grueling hours.
Yeah, pretty brutal.
Trying to find these people.
Yeah, and Dave found out at that time that he gets very nauseated when he's hiking.
I'm not a great hiker. Yeah, it wasn't a great time.
It was an interesting experience, but they came up to the Malayali people, and through Melanesian Talk Pidgin, there were several guys that were able to speak Pidgin. They don't speak it very well, but they knew what we were communicating, and our guys were able to communicate like, hey, we heard that you guys would like missionaries. If we came, these are the 4 things that we would do. We would, 1, learn your language and culture. We would, 2, teach you how to read and write in your language for the first time ever. Their language is only oral. It's never been written down. And so that's a huge piece of the puzzle. 3, we would translate God's talk into your language. So you could, for the first time, hear God's talk, the creator of the world. You could hear his talk. And then 4, we would teach you God's talk. And if these 4 things, if you would want us to come for these 4 reasons, like, we will come. And of course they said yes. Everyone was super excited. And that began the process of us moving in. We lived among them for a couple weeks in their bush houses, kind of really understood firsthand what it was like to be Malayali. It's hard. They are out there in the middle of nowhere. And so we lived with them for 2 weeks. Then the wives and children left, and the men stayed there, milled wood for our houses, built our houses. And then June of 2017, we officially moved into Malayali and began that phase of our work there.
So that was those 4 things. So when we built our houses in Malayali, the first thing that we set out to do was learn their language and simultaneously learning their culture. What makes them tick? What are they thinking when they do these specific rituals? Who are their deities? And how does that all kind of happen for them in their reality of what they think is going on in the world? And so learning their language and culture was probably about a 2.5 year process. And
David, could you real quick just speak to, like, why would you do that? Like, so you could teach these people English. That's an option. Like, why would you learn their, because you're now trilingual, right? So English, Melanesian, Talk Pidgin, and the Malayali language, right? Like, so you learn you learn 2 languages to get to them. Like, why would you, quote, waste your time doing that?
Yeah, totally. I think, and that's a layered question. I think the 2 most prominent layers that we would talk about is, number 1, if we went in there and taught them English, number 1, that would take an enormous amount of time. We all understand that English is kind of ridiculous at some points, but we know it and we enjoy it. But nevertheless, teaching them English is not their heart language. We want to teach them God's talk or God's word so that it can carry on throughout generations until they die or Jesus Christ returns. That was a high priority for us. And giving them another language is like school giving you another language in high school. You probably can dabble with that language still. You probably know how to sit down and stand up, but it has died for you. And so a lot of times when people go in and teach English ends up kind of getting pushed by the wayside after the first generation. We didn't want that to happen. And number 2, it's not just that we want to teach them English, but we want to learn their culture. And if we taught them English, we usually would bypass the cultural understanding of why they do what they do and how they do it. And so if we're not learning their language, that means we're not building communal relations, going to their gardens, going to their ritual sites, going into their houses, and learning all these very specific key things. They are our teachers, but we told them one day, you are teaching us so that one day we can teach you, not our language, but God's talk in your language. And that's something that can carry on for generations and generations to come.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Emily, you'd shared the story with me and with a few others before, specifically about the gardens. So David mentioned going into their gardens. Can you share that story about? I think it's Callie and the garden, so that the people here could hear that story from you.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we have many language helpers. We go out, and while we're learning language, we go out with one of our language helpers, one of our friends, someone that's living in the village, and we just go do life with them. So hiking to their gardens, that's what they do almost every single day. And so yeah, Kali really took me under her wing and was always there to go out with me and teach me language. As hard as it is to teach me language, and it's hard enough just to walk in the bush with me. And so I was always super gracious that she was gracious with me to take me. And so, yeah, one day we're walking through a garden, and I always get afraid when we have to walk. So they cut the trees down and like just bush. They just cut down the trees, and then the way that they maneuver through the garden is they're walking across the logs or trees
that have fell.
Yeah, the fallen trees. Well, sometimes the fallen trees are like 15 feet off the ground or more. And I'm terrified of falling and impaling myself or whatever. So like I've tried many times where I've like kind of crawled across or like scooted across on my bum or whatever. But almost every single time she'll come and grab my hand and, help me across. And this was after probably a year or a year and a half of her doing that with me. And I kind of just stopped when we got to the other side. And I told her, I said, Collie, right now, like you hold my hand every single time we go to the bush. You're teaching me language, you're teaching me your culture, but it's going to switch one day. And one day I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to teach you God's talk. And I'm going to teach you how to read and write in your language so that you can sit down and read, God's talk. And that was just a really sweet moment where she saw it and I saw it. Like, the tables will turn. But it has been such a good thing for all of our relationships to go in there as learners. We didn't go in there as experts of anything. We went in there as complete learners. And that really profited us.
Yeah, it's cultivated a lot of strong relationships, and those relationships have a very strong bond of trust. So it's been very good. Yeah.
So, Emily, as you share that story, I mean, the imagery and the metaphor is just so rich. I'm just picturing like this contrast between, on one hand, you have a physical, actual garden with edible food, and that food will satisfy your hunger for a couple of hours. And she's literally holding your hand to walk into her actual garden. And I'm contrasting that with this, not this prospect, but this future reality that she's going to walk with you as she holds on to your hand into a spiritual garden where there's going to be fruit and food that will satisfy not her stomach, but her soul, not for hours, but for eternity. Like that contrast and that rich imagery is just so biblical and beautiful. I'm so excited that we get to play a small part in your story and in the stories of Callie and the hundreds of Malayali tribe people who are going to hear about the gospel for the very first time. Like, are you kidding? Like, this is so much more satisfying than anything else we could do in life, to play a part in God's global mandate to make disciples of all nations. And like, you guys are doing it, but also we are doing it. The people on this call are doing it. And the church that helped sent you is doing it. And like, it's just such a beautiful tapestry of all the fingers and the parts that play a part in making this work happen. And I'm so grateful you're playing your part and everyone on this call is playing their part. And it's just a very sweet thing that we get to play a part in.
Yeah, definitely. And we feel that too.
Yeah. And that image, we use that image quite often because our people are like in general, they're a very hungry people. They're hand to mouth. So they're constantly needing to find food. But the food that they're able to find is more garden food. They hunt for days on end, but more times than not, they're coming back with absolutely nothing of sustenance. And so the food that they get, it feeds them and satisfies them for 15, 30 minutes, and then they're hungry again. They're constantly hungry. And we say, this message that we've come to bring you is not like your garden food. It's not like your sweet potatoes. It's not like pineapple. This food is going to satisfy your stomachs. And what amazes me the most is they have never had a satisfied stomach because they have never heard the word of God. But the moment they do, I think it's going to be a glorious weight for them that's lifted, that man, we can be completely satisfied.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful.
And
So,
there,
go ahead, Emily.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's neat because we are transitioning into this new phase of work in Malayali, and to see their eagerness, like they've known the 4 things that we've shared from the moment that we've gotten there. And we always repeat those 4 things, you know, as we do medical every single day among the Malayali, but we tell them that's not one of our 4 things. That's just something we want to do to love on you.
So they know your 4 things that you're doing.
They know.
Oh, yeah. If you asked them, they would be able to tell you. You wouldn't understand it, but they would be able to tell you.
David, can you tell us in Malayali, like how they would tell us what the 4 things? So if we went up to one of them and said, hey, what are the 4 things? How would they tell us in the Malayali language? Can you do that?
Yeah, okay. They would say, lay to Bahari, or missionary atade yo el lay to Bahari, missionary love Nafakwe Iauiamo, Le El Tabakari El, Le Yia, missionary Naf, what's it, number 2?
Literacy.
Oh, literacy Iauiamo, Le El Yia, Humiliaife, Le El, God law que mananamau, el lei humilia, el lei coruaife, God law que iauiamo, coruaife el lei el.
No.
Yeah.
You
really put me on the spot there. Yeah.
No, you did good. It's fun to hear that, David, because we know that behind that, and we know you can do it too, Emily, but behind that, there's years and years of investment. But what a valuable investment, because that's going to be a tool to help you do what you do next. So with that in mind, what are you doing next? Like, so everyone knows David and Emily are currently stateside. They're in the U.S. They just welcomed their 3rd baby like a few days ago, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How's the baby doing?
She's good. She's sleeping like a little angel.
Perfect.
Wow. What a blessing. Love that.
Yeah.
So you're going to go back to Papua New Guinea, I think sometime in early 2022. And we know you're eager to get back to people you love, to your home, what's become your home. Where are you headed next? Like, what will the next season of work look like for you?
Yeah. So we have learned their culture and language to fluency. At that point, we created a literacy program. We created an alphabet. They're completely oral. They have never held a pencil or written anything down. We created an alphabet in their language. We have taught 2 full classes of literacy, how to read and write in their own language. So now they can be proficient at not only reading, but writing. And then so now those 2 things that we said we were going to do are completed. And so now we're moving into the 3rd. And the 3rd is translating God's talk so that we can, number 4, teach them God's talk. And so we have translated enough of the portions needed to present the gospel this next year. We have not translated the entire Bible, but what we have done is we have chronologically moved from the Old Testament to the New Testament, picking out the necessary stories to form a cohesive theme line of the one true God sending his son, bringing his son as a redeemer to redeem humans from their sin. So taking that storyline, creation to Christ, We have those portions translated. And so what that means is this next year, we have done, we've learned their language and culture. We've taught them how to read and write. We've translated the necessary portions to teach. And number 4, this next year, 2022, we'll be able to present the gospel for the first time for the Malayali people to hear.
Yeah.
So that's happening next calendar year.
Yes.
Yeah, Lord willing.
Lord
Wow.
willing.
Lord
Yeah.
willing.
Yeah.
Praise God. That's so exciting. How does that make you guys feel?
Oh, you would be blown away. Our people are extremely fearful, but they are so incredibly eager.
Yeah, it's been really neat. Like, I'm so thankful that, we go in and we say, these are the 4 things we're going to do, because one of these, our ladies, her name is Autumn, and she finished a literacy class and started the post-literacy class and was doing really good in there. And she came to me, she's like, Emily, I need to ask you a question. I'm like, okay, yeah, what do you want to ask me? And she said, well, you've learned our language and you've taught us how to read and write, and I've finished. I know how to read and write now. So the next thing is you're going to teach us God's talk. Like, when do we get to hear that? Is that like coming soon? And I said, yes, that's coming so soon. Like, that's why Nathan and Chad and David are in their offices all day long, is because they're translating God's talk right now. And it's coming so soon. And she's like, thank you, shaking my hand, big smile, because they have so many questions. They're so fearful. They want this news,
They have so many questions, and they are so incredibly fearful. The spirit world that their ancestors have given them, they just live in complete and utter fear. And a lot of them are just extremely confused. Is what our ancestors said, is it really true? We don't know. They'll speak like it's completely true, but you get them on their own and they really don't know.
Yeah.
So the Lord has been preparing their hearts. We see it. We really see it, that they're eager to hear, and we're ready to share.
So we're so anxious to get back. Man. We're waiting for that, the birth certificate and the social security card. I've already got her passport papers ready to mail out. And so hopefully we'll be able to head back at the first of this year.
It's like the Super Bowl. Like you've been training, for months and years, and you play the season, and it's like you got to take this break before you can get into the playoffs and go do what you've trained for this whole time. So yeah, I'm excited for you guys. Just a question. This is a good question. We'll just take it now from Lori. Thanks, Lori, for that. What are they fearful about? So you mentioned these people are fearful. Like, what are they afraid of?
Everything. Pretty much everything that is on the ground, everything that has been made. They don't know who has made everything. They have some ideas about who made some things, but everything contains a spirit that's wanting to harm them, that's seeking to harm them. So when they go by a tree, when they go by a bush, when they build their house, when they go to their gardens, when they walk, they need to walk a certain way. They need to say certain things. It's just at every level, in every corner, in every facet of their life, it's dictated by spirits wanting to harm them.
And when they get sick, then it's who poisoned me or who poisoned this person. If someone dies, it's what spirit was angry, what was angry at them to poison them. And it's taught from when they're tiny little kids. I remember walking with one of these little girls, Francie, and she's only about 5 years old. And she heard this bird singing, and she stopped in the middle of the trail. And I was like, Francie, what's wrong? And she's like, it's an evil spirit. Listen. Yeah. And, and so it's from the tiniest, when they're just super small, they're indoctrinated to be afraid of the birds and afraid of the trees and the paths and everything in Malayali.
Oh, it's devastating.
And it's either sacrifice a pig to get the spirit to be okay, or for the appeasement, or if somebody did something to you, then you in return do something to that person.
Wow, gosh, that's so sad. So it's basically anything can be inhabited by an evil spirit.
There's no comfort. There's no comfort, there's no rest, there's no peace.
Well, hey, praise God that you'll be able to bring, some comfort to people who choose to follow Christ. So we'll be praying for that. With that in mind, I want to leave some time for questions How can we be praying for you guys? We'd like to pray for you right now before we go into Q&A. What's top of mind at the moment?
Yeah, I would just biggest prayer request for us right now. So I kind of mentioned it, but Elizabeth, our newest family member, we need to get her paperwork moving, and so for birth certificate and social security card, so that we can apply for a passport and then apply for a visa. And we've heard that due to COVID, things are being slowed down a little bit. So we're just hoping that, the Lord just makes the road really quick, because we are very anxious to get back. As soon as we had Elizabeth, our whole mind's like, okay, now we got to get back. How are we going to get back? As soon as we can, as fast as we can. So that's, I think, our biggest prayer request right now.
Yeah, I think that would be our biggest.
Our coworkers said that.
Yeah, our coworkers are heading back. So the Muellers are here stateside. They took a furlough, and it so happened, it was just, so many moving parts, but they ended up taking a furlough, and they are headed back in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then when they land, he'll be checking with our translation consultant. He'll bring some Malayali men out, check it with our translation consultant, the book of Mark, and that'll be kind of the capstone for the gospel portion of our presentation. And so just pray for our coworkers going back. They're going to be alone in the tribe. We were alone this last season, and it's not easy. It's a very hard thing to do. And so just be praying for their endurance, just for a peace that, outside of their house, it's chaos. And so you could definitely be praying for them while they're there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. We'd love to do that right now. I'd like to invite Matt Sonke, who's on the call. So Matt's the Director of Operations for the Go Fund. Incidentally, he's also an elder at the Sending Church for David and Emily Redeemer Baptist Church. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and pray for the Rimestads briefly before we go into Q&A. Hey, we just have a couple minutes left, but we do have Q&A as our final segment. I see a couple questions that are coming through now. Sarah and someone on our team will get those loaded for me so I can ask them. We have a few questions that came up previous to tonight that we want to answer. So one of them was from Jill and Bill Costello, and they asked, this is a great question, how are the current missionaries on the field doing post-pandemic in getting back to their host countries? So super good question. A lot of people have asked it. The answer is this. A ton of our partners were actually able to remain in their country during the pandemic, and going through COVID. They just experienced the same difficulties as the people in their people group. Their mission agency didn't determine that they needed to come back. They gave them the choice, and a lot of them stayed. Others were forced to leave, so their mission agency or the country they were in forced them to come home. And they're now, many of them are now just being able to return as borders and visas open up, all that stuff. One of the biggest difficulties for the Go Fund was getting new partners to the field for the first time. As borders were closed, most countries were not issuing brand new visas. So many missionaries couldn't launch for the first time. In terms of numbers, I'll give you 3 numbers. Missionaries who were on the field and stayed, 26. So we had 26 missionaries who were on the field and stayed. Next number, missionaries who were on the field and returned was 6. So 26 on the field and stayed, and only 6 who were on the field returned. And the missionaries who were pre-field and delayed was 10. So these are people who hadn't yet made it to the field. They otherwise would have been overseas, but they had to delay because of COVID and the challenges aligned with that. Those are kind of some of the breakdowns of a couple of the numbers there. Here's another question. It comes from Jeff Wilson-Hume. Thanks for sending this, Jeff. And this one's for Emily and David. So a couple questions. I'll do them one at a time. First, what language do you start with in the translation process? So we know that you know 2 languages. So it's Melanesian Talk Pidgin and Malayali. When you're actually doing the translation, what language do you start? Or do you start with English? Which of the 3 do you begin with?
Yeah. So I have a massive screen. There are 4 windows of that screen. The first window is Greek and Hebrew, depending on what I'm working with. The second window is an English translation. The third window is Malayali, and the last window is Melanesian Talk Pidgin. And it is a beautiful blend, but we go in that order. So we go Greek to Hebrew, English, Malayali, and then we look at the National Talk Pidgin Bible, and that kind of helps us with clues It kind of helps us with some of the schemes or some of the imagery that they use. It's just all around helpful just to look at what the national language has done. It doesn't translate into Malayali, but that's kind of the sequence of how we begin looking at the language of translation.
Wow. Wow, it's so good. So technically it's 5 languages. How could I leave out Greek and Hebrew as well, in addition to the other 3? Yeah, that's pretty good. That might give me a headache having that many screens. That's amazing. So here's
I wear glasses.
yeah, blue light glasses. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So what does regular worship look like for you in the Tribe Without a Church? So Jeff asked this one too, like David and Emily. So you are still working out your relationship with the Lord. How does that look without a local church there?
Yeah, so as of right now, us and our coworkers, we are the local church in Malayali. And so we gather every Sunday morning in one of our houses. We rotate, and whoever's house we're at, they lead worship and present a message for us. And then we do little Sunday school for the kids. And yeah, and so for right now, we are the church. And so the Malayali people hear us singing, and they know that they know our routine. They know what we do every single day, and they could tell you at what time of the day, on what day we're going to be doing, because we are like in a routine. So yeah, that's kind of what we do for now.
But boy, prayerfully, that is going to change. And it's going to look very different. But we want to model the New Testament church. We want to have elders and deacons. We want to have men and women being disciples, sitting under the word, singing, reading scripture, just really taking our cues from just the information that Paul passed on to Timothy about how to have a healthy, thriving church.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, we look forward someday to hearing a recording of the Malayali people singing some worship songs that hopefully they wrote. That'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
So here's a great question from Diane. Thanks for sending this. I think it's Diane Williams on the call. How soon do you expect a national pastor could be trained? Like as you're projecting out, looking at other people who've done this in their timelines, like what's the fastest and the slowest, and maybe just the average time you expect for a national pastor to be trained? And by the way, just to clarify, for national pastor, we mean a Malayali tribal person who actually becomes a pastor of a Malayali church, so that you leave, church is still happening.
Yeah. Oh, that's our prayer.
Sorry, that's Diane Hamlin, by the way. Thank you, Diane Hamlin.
Yeah. One day we will. That's a great question. I'll tell you the timeline. The timeline of what we see, we're going to complete the entire New Testament. That means the entire New Testament is going to be translated into the Malayali language. And then all the portions of the Old Testament and the books that we want to complete will kind of set the plow down and plow as much as we can of the Old Testament as well. That gives us around 7 to 10 years. We haven't seen really a translation go any less than 5, but we've definitely seen translation take more than 10. So we're kind of thinking the next 7 to 10 years after the gospel's presented, that in that time frame, there could be some faithful men who love their wives, who teach their children and are faithful. And at that point, we would want to start equipping that man for the responsibility of eldership. And we would like a plurality of elders, just not one single. But we're looking, after the gospel is presented, somewhere between the first 7 years. There's a high potential we could get faithful men within 2. And we want to slowly give responsibility, not being eager, because these are brand new believers who have no reservoir for God and the Bible. And so we just want to be patient and we want to go easy, but we definitely want our eyes open to who's faithful and able to teach and willing to shepherd.
And this will be the longest stint, once we present the gospel. Now this is the long haul. This is, this is the disciple phase or discipling phase, and the teaching phase. This is where we're looking at 7 to 10 years left, at least.
At least.
Wow, I love it. So time for just another question or two, but we had someone ask pre-call tonight, how many more qualified missionaries are waiting if the Gulf Fund had more money to be able to help them? This one's always tricky because we don't want to approve someone before we have the funding, obviously. So we don't want to promise something we can't afford. That being said, based on our current projections and our current number of missionary applications that we have in the pipeline, we're hoping to establish funding for 3 more missionaries this year and 25 next year. So we anticipate next year is going to be our biggest year ever in terms of number approved. So again, that's 3 more this year in Q4 before the end of the year, and 25 next year. So if we had more funding, we'd be able to approve up to 28 through the end of next year. Another great question from Craig Hurdy. Thanks, Craig, for this one. Do you have garden tools and grow your own food? If not, what are the food sources that you rely on? Help us understand what you eat when you're out there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great question because we are really remote. It's a 2-hour helicopter flight to get to us. No roads, no stores or supermarkets or anything like that. And so the first thing we did when we moved into Malawi is we started a garden in our backyard because that's what they do. And so that's the way we started learning about their life. And let me tell you, it is hard work. You don't have any weed killer out there. And so, yeah, we've had a garden and we grow whatever they grow. So we grow sweet potatoes, pineapple, papaya, corn.
We tried to grow cilantro.
Pumpkins.
We had cilantro for a season.
Cilantro.
Yeah.
They weren't big fans about that.
No, they didn't like
But green onions, things of that nature, that's what we grow. But it's really hard. We're actually phasing out of our garden because a pig has destroyed it royally. Pigs have come in our garden.
Time. Yeah.
It's very frustrating, but again, it's just experiencing their lives because they come back from their gardens just sobbing in tears. And, you know, we know now right away that a pig ate their garden, and their garden, it gets completely demolished if a pack of pigs comes in there. And that's their livelihood. That's their food. You know, how are they going to feed their kids? And so pigs come in my garden and have destroyed it. But we also have a backup. So every 4 to 6 months, when the helicopter comes, it brings with it supplies for us from town. And so that's like your flour and butter and powdered milk and oats. It is limited. It's not like going to Walmart or I don't know, Trader Joe's or anything like that.
We ain't eating ice cream. Let's just say that.
But we've learned to just, we eat the, same things, and we're grateful for it. And we have way more than our sweet people. And so we feel really spoiled out there, so no complaints.
Wow. Well, we'll send some boar or pig repellent with you
darling.
next time you go. Yeah, we'll send that over. Hey, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you doing the interview tonight. I want to move the thing along to get everyone out on time. Just a couple of quick things before we're done here. For starters, we mentioned that we're going to give away 2 tickets to CrossCon, and we have selected at random 2 winners. First one is Katie K. Daniels, which I believe is Katie Mullen, if I'm not mistaken. That'd be our chairman's wife, so maybe there's a little stuffing in the ballot box. But Katie, we'd love to have you at CrossCon. And then Rebecca Meyer as well. You both won a free digital access pass to CrossCon. By the way, David and Emily will be at CrossCon on stage, which is super cool. I'm also sharing their story. So the 2 of you, keep your eye out on your email. Tomorrow, Sarah will email you a coupon code for free registration. For the rest of you, if you would like to join for CrossCon, you can purchase tickets to go. Join us virtually. You'll get an email after this call with information if you want to do that. And if you're in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, join us. Or if you're not going to join, we'd love to see you while you're in town. Reach out to us so we can do that. Just a closing administrative note. This is a quarterly call. We'd love for you to join each quarter. We're always going to bring you something fresh and new. The next State of the Organization is going to be in the end of January of 2022. We'll send you dates soon. Everyone, thank you for joining tonight. The event is now over. God bless you. If you'd like to stay on for a minute for some unscripted, serendipitous conversation, you're welcome to do so. God bless you, and you all have a great night. David, you're one of those guys, dude. Like, I feel like most people could just listen to you read the dictionary. You just like you're so like energetic when you talk. I just love
dude,
listening to you, man.
I'm a horrible reader, man. If I read the dictionary, I think you'd get really annoyed. Like, what is this guy's problem?
We can't tell people enough how weak we are and how we are really. It's just the Lord 100%.
100%, man. 100%. Like and that's the thing. That's the cool thing about the Go Fund. Like, I don't know how many people are on, but like we've always said, dude, Like our student debt wasn't a speed bump. It wasn't a hurdle. It was a mountain. It was a mountain. And we couldn't move it on our own. We couldn't. And so God needed to show up, step in, and do it. And the same thing with Malayalam. We could not do this on our own. I'm dyslexic.
And I'm like the biggest scaredy cat in the whole entire world.
Are we gonna do this?
But yet he calms our fears. He gives us wisdom.
He just has given us success, and it has made us so grateful.
Yeah.
David, you probably lost a good 20 or 30 pounds going to Papua New Guinea.
No, like I lost
65 pounds.
65 pounds. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh,
that's what a diet of bananas and cilantro will do for you.
Oh, it's stress and bananas, man. Stress and bananas. Yeah.
No, it was, but we knew that our time of eating ice cream and donuts was coming to an end. So we really tried to pack it on there.
Oh, it went down in a big way. And
before we got to Papua New Guinea.
I got big, and it was a bad decision. I was happy, but it was hard, you know? I kid you not. I didn't say it because I didn't want to spend too much time. But the guides are the guys who helped us find the Malayali. We see them every once in a while when we go to this nearby airstrip. It's about a 10-hour hike away. And sometimes they come to us. They don't speak the Malayali language. They speak the national language. But they remember. They could tell you every location that I threw up. And they do it in such a funny way where it's just they thought I was going to die. They thought I was going to die, you know.